Hey, Tom Patterson here with Flying, and joining us now is Josh Harnagel. He's Vice President of Marketing at Redbird Simulations. Thank you so much, Josh, for making time. I'd love to start out by talking a little bit about how you first got interested in aviation and how that path led to Redbird.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. Thanks for making the time, and thank you for Flying Magazine for putting this great event on. I'm a third generation pilot. My dad and my granddad were both pilots, and I kind of grew up flying airplanes at the airport, but didn't really pursue flight training when I was in high school. It wasn't really until I got to college that I started missing it. So I ended up going out to the airport, getting my pilot's license, and eventually becoming a flight instructor and really pursuing a career in aviation and general aviation in particular. And I ended up in Austin for my wife to go to UT, unfortunately. And then Redbird was hiring for an installation manager. Got lucky, got in early on, and I've been with Redbird for 13 years now.
Congratulations, that's great. Can you share with us the really interesting story behind Redbird Simulations? From what I know, it started in 2006. You've delivered more than 3,000 aviation training devices to more than 50 countries around the world. How did all of this begin?
Yeah, so Redbird started because our founder, Jerry Gregoire, was a retired technology executive. He's flying a King Air at the time, and he was doing training at CAE or Semi-Flight or something like that in Wichita, and he was just overwhelmed or underwhelmed, I guess, with what you got for your money in the large sims, like the visuals and the everything were just so antiquated, especially at that time. And so he said, maybe we can build a simulator with off the shelf, commercially available hardware that could be competitive in the flight training space. Use kind of the Dell model in a lot of ways, and brought that in, and that's kind of where it started, and it's really grown from there. We started with just the larger sims targeting sort of flight schools, universities, and we've expanded up market to cockpit specific simulators that for citations and King Airs and that kind of thing, all the way down to desktop simulators that an individual pilot could put in their home, and even individual controls, yokes, throttles, that kind of stuff for simulation enthusiasts.
That's great. Could you sort of expand on that a little bit? Because I know that Redbird has different levels of proficiency that in their simulators that can help pilots go to the next level. Can you tell us what's available when it comes to proficiency?
Yeah, so we have a whole range, like I said, of simulators. We have something called the J, which is a desktop simulator. It's not FAA approved, but let's say you want to just fly approaches or flight before you go out to the airport. You're not looking for logging currency or anything like that. The J is perfect for that. You don't have to buy a computer and figure out what controls you want and go through, simulator message boards or something like that. You buy a J, you set it up. It takes 5 minutes, and it'll work as a really good sort of basic procedures trainer for you to kind of get you familiar with an area or with airspace or with an approach, something like that. A step up from that is something called the TD, and we have a TD and a TD2, and those are really focused on instrument training for proficiency. They're FAA-approved devices, basic aviation training devices, so you can log your 6 approaches in 6 months in them, and you maintain your instrument currency. And those are a little more specific. They have actual buttons and knobs to manipulate, and then from there you step up into the larger sims, the advanced aviation training devices, which are really, honestly, they're more for flight schools, flying clubs, universities. We do have some individuals that get them in their home, but they're wraparound visuals, interchangeable controls, a lot more. You can tailor them a lot more towards a specific aircraft than you can something like the TD. So if you fly an Archer or a Bonanza, the LD or SD, one of the larger sims, can be tailored more towards that. And then we'll have from there we get into the motion devices, the FMX, the MCX, and then up on King Airs and so forth.
So you mentioned FAA certification or approval. What is that process like?
So the FAA, as a pilot, I feel really weird saying this, but the FAA has done a really good job for the industry at this level of device, the aviation training device. They've created a process that allows the manufacturer, us, to submit an application for a new device to a single office. And we say, this is all the things it does. This is the performance criteria. These are the checks. Maybe they come out, they fly it, they look at it, and then they approve it. And that approval is good for 5 years, wherever and across all the devices that are like that same one. So we as manufacturer get it approved, and then you as the user, you just set it up. It works. It's good. You have a letter. It says it, and that compares to other countries where when you get a new simulator in Europe or Canada, the individual simulator has to be approved, and so the operator has to deal with the authority, and it gets very complicated and convoluted and honestly expensive. So the FAA has done a really nice job. So it's very easy for the individual operator to have a sim that's FAA approved here in the States.
So what new products are on the horizon at Redbird?
Well, so we have, this is actually kind of a sneak peek. I don't know if we've talked a whole lot about some of this, but we have a couple of new, one new hardware line that we're launching, they're going to be launching really around the Cirrus product. Hopefully we'll have them pretty soon, maybe in time for the holidays. Really focusing on cockpit-specific Cirrus stuff for pilots that fly Cirrus. And then the other one that we're real excited is Redbird Pro, which is a proficiency app designed to help pilots maintain and track their proficiency over time, and to train to become more proficient.
So does the product for Cirrus apply to both the prop version of the Cirrus, the SR-22, for example, and the new jet?
No, we're not in the Vision Jet yet. So it's just the SR-20 and SR-22.
Okay, great. That sounds like a very exciting product, and I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about sims compared to actual flight time?
Sure.
How flight time training might differ from a sim? What kind of additional value, for example, could you get from training on a sim as opposed to getting proficient in the cockpit in a real world situation?
Yeah, sure. So I think most people, when they think about simulator training, think about instruments, flying instruments, and they think about doing emergencies. Those are like the default, and those are totally valid. You can do really good instrument training, and you can fly emergencies, stuff you wouldn't want to do in the airplane. But where I really think the sim is most valuable is the fact that you can focus on specific skills or specific phases of flight and do it repetitively. So you fly the same maneuver over and over, you fly the same procedure over and over, maybe with different conditions. In the airplane, you can't ever really do that because it's a constant stream of events, right? You have to taxi and take off and fly to the practice area, do your maneuvers, do your approaches, and then land. Where in the sim, you can just jump right in and say, I want to shoot 6 approaches in 30 minutes. And it's totally doable in a simulator, whereas in an airplane, that would be pretty rough.
Yeah, I would imagine. Now, in training, simulators offer a lot of cost effectiveness for any pilot. Could you break it down for us? Do you have any metrics you could share?
Yeah, so if you're talking about training for a license, like a private pilot's license or an instrument rating, your average pilot, we'll focus on the private pilot because we have some experience there. Your average private pilot is probably about 75 hours in the airplane, log time, at somewhere between $150 to $200 an hour is your average cost per hour there. We used to have a flight school in San Marcos called Redbird Skyport that I helped run as a flight instructor, and what we were doing down there was a really simulator-focused curriculum, so it was like you would learn everything in the sim first, and then you would do it in the airplane, demonstrate in the airplane. And so we had a Part 141 approval, so we were able to get people done in less time legally. So we would end up with someone with about 35, 37 hours in the airplane and 25 to 40 hours in the simulator. So it's still roughly the same total training time. It's just offloading all that excess that doesn't actually count in the, towards the rating, isn't required for the rating or the license, and putting it in the simulator. They end up being better pilots, better prepared for the real world, and they can do it for significantly less money, a third the cost, something like that.
Wow, a third.
Yeah.
That is a big number. A lot of savings there. What new trends and innovations in the sim industry are going to help this pilot shortage that we've heard so much about in commercial aviation? Is it natural for us to assume that the more sims that go out the door at Redbird, the more pilots we're going to have? Are you directly connected to helping bolster the numbers of pilots throughout the world?
Well, I think we certainly help, but probably, so there's a couple of things. One, I do think simulators can be a really good kind of gateway, a way for people, young people to get interested in aviation, and especially because you can, we have customers that have smaller simulators that they take all over the place and let kids fly. And that can be a really good opportunity because, aviation tends to be kind of self-selecting, right? It's the folks that are motivated enough to go out to the airport are the ones that end up becoming the pilots, when there's probably a lot of people that would, if they were exposed to it, might be more interested in it. And so simulation can really help with that. We're expanding. One of our biggest customer segments right now is actually high schools and middle schools. The schools are really using simulation, aviation in particular, to teach STEM topics because it's engaging for the students, and then they can talk about science and math and technology and all that. And so I do have some hope there. But I really think one of the biggest advantages of the simulators is they're way more profitable to operate for the flight schools, and they will help keep flight schools in business, which is we always talk about getting more people involved. Right now, call a local flight school and see when you can start training. And it might be a little bit because there's not enough flight schools, there's not enough instructors. And so I'm one of the things I think simulation can really do is make training more efficient, get people through the pipeline faster, can make the businesses a little more secure. And so there's less likelihood that they go out of business. And long term, I think simulation is really super valuable in a pilot's career. And I mean, the airlines support this. They use simulation all the time. Every 6 months, the pilots are going in for it. And I think long term in their career, it really helps them stay proficient and stay safe. So it's a super, super important part of it. But interestingly, I think things like VR and some of the really low cost simulation opportunities to get aviation in front of more people is really a really good tool, probably our best tool, honestly, outside of higher pay for airline pilots, to get more people in the industry.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I just wanted to ask one more question.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing a lot of work on this topic, so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it. The aviation industry, as you know, appears to be poised to enter this new era of electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxis in the coming years.
Yeah.
And, some estimates predict that the advanced air mobility industry might need, about 60,000 pilots by 2028. So what's the simulation industry doing from your perspective to gear up for all the new aircraft and for all the new pilots that would be needed for these air taxis?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting space, and I think we're really excited about it. We're pretty involved with some of the committees that are help building the training programs and the regulatory standards. From an actual building hardware, designing software, it's kind of early for us. Part of the some of the viewers might not know this, but right now the standards is you have to be a private pilot or a commercial pilot, right? So just go through regular flight training. In the future, the plan is that there will be a different, a much simplified cockpit, much more simplified cockpit, a much fewer, less hours required to train, and a smaller skill set because they will operate inside an extremely controlled environment with a lot of automation. And so once that kind of gets fleshed out, what does that look like? What do the cockpit looks like? Are there physical controls that they manipulate? Could they actually fly it, or is it just buttons and knobs that they're moving to adjust parameters? Once we kind of get some of those details nailed out, I think simulation will definitely play a big role in it as we go on forward.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much, Josh Harnagel at Redbird Simulations, for taking time to be with us today, and thank you for watching. I'm Tom Patterson with Flying.